what I had seen that year in 2015 was that, at least for the Boston region, nothing had changed. The events were still the same nitty-gritty events I went to back in 2006, 2008, 2010. West Coast has started to building upon the Twitch platform. Everyone has streams. Bracket technology was very, starting to slowly advance, and you can follow tournaments online. And I was like, this is really cool. And how come locally no one's really doing this kind of stuff? So me and my friend, we co-founded Big Flu Esports, and we also involved some of the local big community leaders in the Super Smash Bros. Scene to join the team. And from there, we just kept growing. We started at bars, and then we ended up in BU's auditorium, Boston University's auditorium, working with their gaming club. And we've also worked with Emerson University to do a couple of events. Then in 2016, we took a big leap. We decided that it was time the Northeast had a big esports event. I know there's PAX. PAX, is huge. I consider it more of like an industry event. You kind of go there to try out new things. It's not the gameplay room and the tournament room for PAX is kind of like it's a side event. It's it's in some ballroom. Probably this one right here. It's in the same convention center. But I want to do an event where competition was the focus, and that's why we started Shine. To our surprise, 2,000 some people came out in 2016. We were very happy with the numbers. At the time, I got a lot of phone calls saying, "What is this event? I've never seen a first year 3-day event get that high of numbers." Because all of a sudden at 2,000, we were going almost toe-to-toe with a lot of the fighting game community events that have been around for nearly a decade, and they had most recently just cracked just the over 1,000 attendee count. So we continue to host that. We did 2017 just half a year ago, and 2018 is going to occur this year. Last year we brought in over 3,000 competitors from over, I think, 40 states, so almost complete representation of the United States and 12 different countries. So we're very excited about that. But that's enough about me. The thing I want to talk about today is, let's take a bigger look at professional esports. So right now I consider LCS, Overwatch League, the CSGO leagues by Valve, and also like the international stuff by Valve. That's the pinnacle of competition. That's the very, very top. Literally caters to the top 50 to 150 best players in each game. Being a pro right now, I think it's very, very lucrative. You're well respected by your peers. You have a lot of fans. The competition is great. You get to play alongside the best in the world, and also you're competing against the best in the world to win that #1 slot. You're kind of famous on social media, online at least. Offline, people probably still know Jeremy Lin more. But that's okay. Esports is still growing, and one day we'll get there. And also the support. I think this is the coolest part about being a professional esports player is that you live in gaming houses, even though some teams are starting to transition off that into a little bit more of a corporate model where they have an office. But you have kind of like live-in chefs, fully stocked refrigerators. If any of you guys interned at a big tech company like Facebook, Google, you'll know what that feels like. So yeah, being a pro is right now in 2018 is good. And I think if you talk to any of the industry people in esports right now, like the most, probably safest ways to get involved is become the best, even though that's the safest, not the easiest. So here's the main thing I want to talk about. Esports is top-heavy. And what does that mean? So when I say top-heavy, I mean there's a lot, all the growth you see right now, a lot of it is targeted towards the big teams. So you have your TSMs, your Clutch Gamings, your CLG, your Liquids, your Cloud9s. A lot of big money involved in this. However, at the top level, you only have roughly 50 players that are on the string one for each of the teams, and maybe another 20 or so that's doing streaming or on the academy teams, sparring partners, and support staff. But if you look at the numbers, there are hundreds of millions of people playing, and we're only just now seeing the trickle down to a college league. Collegiate leagues like Harvard and MIT. I don't know. Are you guys officially recognized by Harvard? That's our club is recognized, but we're not like a sports team. Right. Okay. So the answer was that Harvard is a recognized club, but not a recognized sports team, and I think that's going to change in the next year or two. And I think it's kind of it's almost like it's starting to kind of come down to collegiate level esports. I know there's big challenges with the NCAA, and also there's a lot of local regional college leagues trying to start up their own teams. I recently visited upstate New York, a small college named Casanova next to Syracuse. 1,000, yeah, I think it's roughly about 1,000 bodies for their student base, and even them are considering starting an esports team. The funny part is that the administration doesn't know about it. I talked to their class, and they said, yeah, we actually have one of the esports club, they started a team under the school name. And when I was consulting the chairman of the board, it's like, we have this? So I think there are players definitely everywhere and on campus that have either unofficially represented schools as part of a school team. And I think that's really cool, mostly because that allows more people to get a feel for a competition at a kind of on stage. I'm sure the Harvard team that played today, I don't know if you guys ever played on the CSL stage or DreamHack stage. Playing on stage feels very different. It's not the same as playing from home, because all of a sudden you become the performers of a show, and there's a new set of challenges, anxiety, and the kind of pressure you feel to perform on a stage, and also at the same time, if you win, it's that feeling of achievement is much different. Kind of similar to if you played on any other sports team for any school. So going beyond collegiate levels, I think one thing that we're still lacking in the whole esports scene is the grassroots stuff. It's kind of interesting because I think for PC titles before, we all started grassroots, and then all of a sudden, a lot of them faded away. I wanted to attribute it to the online service model and the removal of the LAN capabilities, and just excruciating costs and extremely challenging logistics to set up large events beyond just hosting your 10 friends in your mom's basement. However, I think with the new interest in esports, we can create these events. And I think how we're going to be able to sustain esports is beyond the professional league. We need the little leagues, we need the amateur leagues, we need the college leagues, we need the recreational leagues. And also, to a certain degree, I think high school leagues do have a place in all of this. So this chart is not, it's not to scale. It's just kind of used it for representation. So this is kind of how, it's not completely accurate, but kind of the ratio of what represents like League of Legends, the breakdown. So the big icon on the right, that's Challenger. That's the top 200 players. So these are usually the people that get involved in the pro scene as an active roster. At the same time, you might end up getting a few players from the smallest sliver of the pie, which is the Masters League. Below that, you have a lot of people in Diamond. I think only very, very few Diamond players qualify for LCS because there's like 5 tiers to each of the leagues. And for League of Legends, you have to be at least Diamond 2 to be considered active roster, I think, on a team. But if you look at it, beyond the 2 smallest slivers on the pie in top 200, the rest of the player base actually represents roughly like 85% of the player base of League of Legends playing the competitive mode available in the in-game client. Currently, there's very little ways for them to experience something on a similar level to LCS or even at a miniature scale. However, if you look at like the NBA or soccer, FIFA, and everything else, you do have that. You have your smaller amateur leagues and even recreational leagues. Like, how many of you have played a recreational sport growing up, like in elementary school? Yeah, all of you. That was fun, right? It was fun to play with your friends, make new friends, win against other teams. Eat those oranges the moms always bring. I love that. So why do I think it's important? So in online games, like, we have this big problem called toxicity. And a lot of it is due to kind of like, we start playing these games at a very young age. We don't know better. And you get angry. You can't expect like a 12 to like a 14-year-old to control their emotions very, very, very well. And at the worst part, there's no guidance. And what I mean by guidance is that when you did play basketball in those recreational leagues, who bought you your ball? Your parents did. Who taught who helped you with drills and dribble practice? Your parents did. However, for games, they kind of sometimes they just leave you alone to your own thing. You just play by yourself. You see a lot of other people getting angry online, and you start to feel that's acceptable behavior. But as you grow older, you realize it's not. Surprise. So what I think about recreational leagues is that, and I've talked to Jason, the Microsoft retail store representative here, had a good talk with Doug from the NALCS about this yesterday. Is that like if you look at the recreation leagues and what is the first things they teach you? It's the etiquette. You shake hands with your opponents before you play. You bow to each other or something, and at the end of the game, you walk up to them and shake hands, say good game. That doesn't exist in the online world. Like, you can say a simple GG, but what does that really mean? I think physical contact and the social interactions is what keeps us together. And if you look at League of Legends success, why is it so successful versus other games? I would attribute one of the factors is because of the social nature. It's 5v5. You play with people, and I always tell people, like, the game is good. You come for the game. You'll play the game, but you'll stay because of the people you play with. And I think that's true for not just video games, where like when you choose like in the future what companies you decide to work for, that's also true. So yeah, sustaining the future. I want to see recreational leagues take off. Create within certain regions, so they don't have to be global in nature. Online can cover that. There's new developers will cover the online basis. They need to scale. However, to build upon the next level of the esports community, I think we really need to take aim at the other millions of people playing the game competitively and want a taste of what that competition feels like. One of the big projects I'm trying to work on in Boston is that launching a kind of like a recreational league with the Microsoft retail stores. I don't know if you guys ever been into one before, but if you go into the store and you take a look, there's actually a little event space in the back. And if you kind of like try to abstract it a little bit, it actually looks like a very small miniature size like LCS or like a esports studio. And given that leverage across the country with all these stores, like you can create something really great, I think. But to get there, I think there's a lot of skill sets that need to be developed, and these are some of the ones I kind of list up here. And when I go out to when schools bring me on to do their consultations, like, hey, what should we teach? What's needed in this industry? And there's a large need for basically technology infrastructure. Bracket technology hasn't really caught up until recently. Operations infrastructure. How do you outfit venues like the BCEC, to handle the kind of events that we want to put on. Event organization, the logistics, how do we get our PCs, how do we want to set them up, closed channel communication loops. I think that's all really important. And the big one, statistics and analytics. That's what we're all here at this conference for, right? But if you look at the amount of esports analytics panels, I think there's only 2 this whole weekend. I think there could be a lot more. It's a lot of interesting things that can be surfaced from there. Basketball, baseball. They have those little cool, strike zone boxes, 3D images of people on the basketball court. And you all seen, the NFL, the first down lines. That kind of stuff, that kind of technology. I think it's needed to make esports a little bit more digestible, a little bit more interesting to watch. At the same time, it gives the people shoutcasting, the people broadcasting, richer data that they can provide to the at-home viewers. Yeah, I'm gonna keep my talk short today. So that's the kind of stuff I want to talk about. We'll be queuing up the Harvard versus MIT match soon. We're going to take a little break, but before that, if anyone has any questions for me, I'm going to open this up to Q&A.
One of the things you touched on was the idea that there's no recreational leagues for games in general. One of the ideas that you touched on was how there are no recreational leagues for gaming, and how that leads to a lack of etiquette and problems with toxicity that you said. Do you not think that another big issue is the online nature and how that leads to it being a lot easier to conduct yourself in a rude way, and if there's sort of a way to address that problem going forward?
I think it's very tough, and I think there's definitely ways to curb that kind of behavior, definitely not reward that kind of behavior. But in an essence, I think that kind of behavior can be also you can mitigate it from the get-go, not completely prevent it, but definitely prevent it from surfacing a lot more frequently due to the environment that you play in. And that's why I mentioned, if you start playing a game and you have some guidance and say, hey, this is how you're supposed to approach things, it creates a better mindset. I'm going to go over here. Oh, this here. We got one here. Okay.
Hi. What do you think the best setting on a college campus would be for to add some socialization to it, or to create a good space for esports?
This is a good question. I know a lot of colleges are trying to build out esports spaces, and the first thing you search on Google, you'll see is UCI's $250,000 investment on a giant esports lab. I don't think you need to do that. If you want to just test the waters, you can even convert one of the many meeting rooms you have, painted school colors, get 10 pieces like this, have them back to back. They don't even take up that much space. And this is what I actually advised one of the colleges I recently visited, because we were sitting in the boardroom and they said, what should we build out? We don't have the $250,000 budget. And I was like, hold on, you guys have a 1,000 person student body. That's not huge. UC Irvine is probably in the 20, 30,000s, significantly bigger. What you could do is, set up a little meeting room that, 10 people can play in, because that's all it takes for a team. Well, two teams, 10 setups, 10 PCs will allow 2 teams to compete against each other. The rest is the similar things you have in a meeting room, like a projector, so you can do kind of like tape review like you would do for any other sports that you play. And for a little decoration, you don't have to go into anything very serious. This is 6 lights. Looks great, doesn't it? You don't even need that. Just paint it the school colors. And that's what I recommend most schools do. Like, if you're testing the waters of esports, it's a small investment to make. I've got another one right here.
As someone who wants to go into college athletics for a profession, I think esports is obviously going to get there someday. I'm honestly surprised it's not. You mentioned the NCAA, who has a lot of red tape around a lot of things. What are some of the major issues with the NCAA you can speak to that you've ran into, just out of curiosity?
Full disclosure, I have not worked with NCAA before. All I can say from my experience, mostly anecdotal, when I speak to colleges, is the challenge with the NCAA is that technically you're not allowed to have paid athletes. And it'll create a very, very strange dynamic, because a lot of the esports players, they make money from streaming. They could have endorsement deals or like affiliate deals with Amazon or other retailers. And technically that's not allowed when you play for the NCAA, because you're not allowed to enrich yourself with your position in there. And that kind of makes you question, should I, join this new NCAA esports league and forfeit all this versus, I'll just go do my own thing. I can still get recognized by a team anyways. So since NCAA is not treated like, there is no feeder pool in esports. And that's kind of what NCAA gets used for in traditional sports. That's for another talk. I know there's a lot of discussion about that and disagreements on both sides of the spectrum. But that dynamic alone, that esports players can make a solid living and also get discovered through other channels, makes this a really tough thing for the NCAA.
So one of the things that you talked about was traditional sports, and especially the etiquette that you can teach with a coach, sort of guiding these younger people. And I know in League of Legends, coaches have come to play more of a role over the years, from when they barely were part of a team, or teams didn't even have coaches, to now where every LCS team has a coach and they're there for pick and ban. So sort of how do you see coaches as a role going forward? Do you think that they'll become more popular? Do you see at some point having leagues with coaches teaching people?
I definitely see coaches going forward being more popular. If you remember from season 1 or season 2 of LCS, when players retire from their roles and become coaches, sometimes there becomes infighting because the active players are disagreeing with the coach, and conversations get heated, and it becomes a argument with a lot of expletives, and say, hey, you don't even play anymore, you're not better than me, why do I have to listen to you? That was a very common problem in early day esports, not just in League of Legends, but if you were in the 90s playing Counter-Strike and the COW, I think the COW-I online leagues, that was always a big problem when your other teammates don't respect the shot caller. But more recently, I think that has been changing. I think it was necessary well, not really necessary, but it's kind of like a progression, right? Because now, as League is entering its 9th year, you have people that are veterans now, and the new kids, that come in, they say, oh, wow, this guy was, played for this before. He has a lot more experience than I do, and the new players, recognize that playing on LCS is a lot different than playing in solo queue. Another thing I want to touch on for that is that I taught a class at Emerson this past fall. It's the very first esports class, and one of the really cool things was I had a ton of students that were part of various sports teams for Emerson, so lacrosse, swimming, volleyball, and all that sorts. And I threw this question against them, and I was like, have you ever felt that you can outperform your coach? And if you do feel that you can outperform your coach, do you start to question the legitimacy of the advice given? Or you start challenging authority or any feelings of rebellion? And the answer to that was across the board, no. And the reason for that is they're kind of like, I think for collegiate sports and even high school sports to a certain degree, they have a system, and you come to when you're part of the system, you come to respect the system. There's still some parts that's a little bit broken about the system due to external pressures from parents and stuff, but for the most part, the kids, when you're involved at such a young age, you're always taught to respect your elders. So when you join that specific, school team, you know how hard it was to get into. So you follow orders, and you follow the captain, you follow your seniors. I think that's slowly starting to take roots in esports, especially with the college teams. They look really cohesive. And I think that's a wonderful thing, and that's something I want to see kind of spread down the pipeline. So I compare online games of League of Legends to 5-on-5 pickup basketball, and it's kind of funny. But if you play 5-on-5 basketball, when you mess up, you say my B, you say my bad, that was my fault, and your teammates will say it's okay, no, let's get the next play. No one's going to tell you to uninstall. You miss a shot, or you airball, your teammate's not going to say, you suck, you want to uninstall basketball, go play soccer, go or something. That's not going to happen. And that's the kind of attitude, I think it should transition into online. It's everyone makes some mistakes. You play the pickup game so you can, have fun, and so you can, learn some. You maybe kind of train and learn, but there's no reason to get to that level of animosity. All right, I think I have time for one more question.
So as an organization, what has kind of been the biggest challenge that you faced with Big Blue Esports?
There's a lot of challenges we face. I think the most challenging thing about Big Blue Esports, and I think this applies to many of the young esports companies as well, is that a lot of this is passion-driven. And like I mentioned above earlier, there's tons and tons of skill sets that we're missing. And for one of the biggest things is especially for the smaller events, is the sales. You get a lot of young kids, they're engineers. That's great, awesome. They're artists, designers. The branding looks amazing, but then you get to the part where we have this great event. How do we get a Coca-Cola on board? How do we get a Gillette on board? How do we sell to other companies? What's important to them? We know what's important to us because we play the game. We live and breathe the game, so we understand the product towards the average to the consumer very well. We call that B2C. However, sales is one thing I will say. I think there's also a ton of good broadcasting technology that we're not utilizing. The guys in the back probably have decades more experience than any of us doing this kind of stuff, and I think that's a really cool part about the NBA and the NFL getting involved in a lot of teams, because they bring a lot of these missing skill sets that a lot of these passion created companies are missing, and kind of filling in the gap and helping us achieve the next level.
All right, so thank you, Shi. Let's give it up for Shi Dang, co-founder of Big Blue Esports. Big Blue Esports and the Prudential Center Microsoft office are supporters of this room, and we're really, really grateful for that and all their help. So now we're going to move to the third match of the day, the third League of Legends match. It was supposed to be our second, but we were fortunate enough to fit in a second celebrity match earlier today. Hopefully you were here for that. It was very exciting. We'll have the same shoutcasters, Jacob Joseph Gorin and Jack Harmoning. They did a phenomenal job during the first two matches, so we're happy to have them stick around with us. So this match will be Harvard versus MIT. There are stakes. The winner of the match will be joining us on stage later for the Alpha Awards. So that'll be from 5 to 6. So give us 5 minutes. We're going to set up a little bit, and then stay tuned. Thank you.